So the phone overheated filming out here in the sun, and we've been waiting for it to cool down in the car. So I'm just picking up again now, do a distance shot as I walk back in. So while we were waiting, I harvested all the beets, and it was 17 pounds. Those are beets. And we had already harvested 4 pounds before this that we ate. So altogether we got 21 pounds from a pack of seed. Now interestingly, some of them didn't form beets at all, and I think those are the ones that I tried to transplant. The greens still grew fine, but they didn't form the beets. So we were over here, but one of the things I forgot to show, there's lots of monarchs around. We've seen a lot of butterflies today, yellow sulfurs and Gulf fritillaries. The monarch flying by. These are our in-ground worm bins because it's so hot here. So this one, the compost is pretty much finished. You can see all the worms. We started it with a little bit of coconut coir bedding that they like, and then we just layer it, cutting up cardboard bag, and not cardboard bags, paper bags, and putting in some of the manure, and then we just put I put our kitchen scraps in the freezer, and then I bring them out here in a load and put them in. We've got a big one in our yard at home too. You can see the worms in there. And then when it's moist, the worms can come up here. If they get too hot, it has holes in it, and they just go out deep into the ground, and then they come back to eat the stuff. So this one's finished. So Liz is gonna go through this one today and pick out the worms so that I can use that compost for planting the rest of the onion starts over there where the beets were. Some more of the peach flowers. They're really pretty. The leaves are starting to come out too. Okay, come back this way. It's very hot out here. Pansies get some of the shade here from the mulberry, but they've been pretty sad with all the heat. Hopefully they'll get a little recharge next week. And here's our shiitake mushroom log. So this is its new resting place. We've moved it around to 2 or 3 different places that we thought were in the shade, and then we came here a different time of day and then found out it was actually in full sun that time. So we think under here is a good spot. We've been hosing it down regularly, but it's probably going to be a few months still before we get any mushrooms coming out. I also have lots of celery in here. We grew lots of celery this year. A lot of times we bring homemade hummus and stuff like that to the garden, and Liz will just eat it with the celery. Over here is our newly planted lavender garden. I've had this pot that I set up with extra good drainage, lots of perlite. Lavender is very, very difficult to grow here because of the humidity, but we're going into the hot, drier months in terms of rain, so if it's going to have any chance to grow for a while, it's right now. And we've got the thyme and the oregano here that we use a lot for the spaghetti sauce, processing all our tomatoes. And these probably also won't do well here, but I put pine bark and compost and some of the sandy soil, and I built up mounds, and I put the lavender on top of the mounds, and I very, very gently watered them in, trying not to get the roots wet. We've never had our lavender flower before, and the nursery had these flowering types. They haven't been able to get in roses this year or any of this stuff, so I guess they were trying to appeal to people through that, and it worked on us. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 types here, and then I had this type that's been struggling along all winter. This other lady here and we figured out this method. If we put shells, I don't know if you can see seashells down there, then it keeps the lower branches off the damp soil for the fungus. So I have some I brought from home I put around this one, but we'll have to do it around the other ones. This is an endangered native plant that grows in pine barrens. It's got little blue flowers. That's the Mexican sage that we're hoping will attract the hummingbirds. This is the very large blue salvia, and behind that, those yellow flowers are a native called starry rosinweed, and it has bloomed almost all year. We've got some other red salvia and milkweed back there too, but you can't see it. A little bit of the bat-faced cupia is hanging on, but it's not doing so great. This is the only one of our 4 fig trees that are left in. So it used to have a yellow fig that took up this whole space, and it came out about 4 feet into the aisle here that the guy was finally able to help me take out so that I could have all this area for planting under the mulberry and not have to worry about going to the emergency room. And 2 different varieties of dragon fruit, one of which lasted from our original dragon fruit, the other one I got from someone as a cutting. And if you see, they are successfully attaching themselves onto the fig here. The fig is dormant right now. You can see I cut up all the branches so I can work around it, and hopefully the shade won't be as dense for all this stuff in the summer. And you can see that it's just starting to leaf out. I tried to leave enough branching to get a decent amount of figs this year. These should really have more sun. These are called kuntis. They're native. We have them because they are host plant for the, I think it's called the Atala butterfly, which really lives more to the south here. It's not seen here very much, but you never know. So we have some of those. Down this back row here are our blueberries. They are all flowering right now. This is the pink lemonade blueberry that has pink blueberries. Then these 3 here, I bought from a guy online who picked them up from a nursery that was going out of business. They're a southern high bush variety, and they're called Meadowlark. They're very tall and narrow. That's their growth habit. So I figured that they would be perfect for this space right here. This was all overgrown last year. The fig shaded out 10 feet here, and it was all filled with dollarweed. Spent a lot of time over the summer pulling stuff out and then filling up these plots. The bees have been all over the blueberries. There's one ripe one. These ones are, there's 4 plants but 3 different varieties. This one's getting a little shaded out. These lower ones are rabbit eye varieties. I mean, they're small, bush-shaped, versus the southern high bush. And different kinds so they can better pollinate each other. This one, so they were all dormant and then they just sprung forth with the blossoms. The Windsor and the Gulf Coast, it's very interesting because you can't tell at all from when they were dormant. They just look like sticks. But the ones that had the most growth last season have now come out with the most flowers, and you can see how that works. So you can't tell, but there's actually logs under here. It goes like this, and then around, and then across to form the acid bed. We try to keep the pH lower for the blueberries. And then we have 3 tea plants here. This one, this was our original one that we bought from the nursery that was very large and healthy, and we couldn't believe we found this one and this other one over here for $4 on the clearance rack at Lowe's. So there's lots and lots and lots of pine bark buried under here and soil acidifier to help bring, the bees are all over these, to help bring the pH down for the blueberries. And not too much fertilizer because they don't like a lot of fertilizer, especially when they first get started. And the ones we've had in the past, and these ones too, last season they sank further and further and further down, and they hate being low like that. So over the summer I pulled everything up, and then using the pine bark and the compost, and I built it really high, so it was about 6 inches above the bed, and then I planted them very, very high so that the crowns were actually maybe 2 or 3 inches above the soil line, because I knew they would sink. And you can see, sure enough, after about 6 months it's almost level, and they seem much, much happier ever since I did that. I did the same with the Mysore raspberry here, which is going crazy under the avocado. We planted them together because it shades the roots of the avocado, and then the Mysore raspberry, you can see the blossoms here, actually produces much better with part shade. These were long, beautiful, beautiful canes coming down here. I'm gonna put, this was all broccoli we just pulled out about 3 or 4 days ago that we had started when this had some shade from the avocados back in the fall. Everything is really carefully positioned so that things that need full sun in the winter are positioned under deciduous things that will shade them in the summer and then lose their leaves and provide the sun in the winter. But we had a lady out here the other day, I had done some plant trading with her, and she wanted to take the cuttings from the Mysore raspberry, which was fine, but I explained to her that it was much, much happier this time around growing it where let it stay a lot more natural and gave it more limited guidance. And I told her it did not work well last time when I cut the tall canes and tried to force it to branch. Well, when she took the cuttings, she took them right off the long main canes here. So I planned to have some kind of wire, some kind of not trellis, but something to kind of loosely drape these canes on over the summer or over the spring while it produces, and then cut them back for the next season. But now they look really sad because she cut all the tips off, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. This avocado is doing really pretty well. You can see it's a little bit deficient if you look at these leaves, but it's flowering right now. Last year it dropped all of its blossoms and it had no fruit set. Here, I'm going to step back further so I can get a distance view. It's hard with the silhouetting. So we've been giving them lots of Epsom salts and other micronutrients, and after I pulled the broccoli out, I put together what manure and compost I could around here to try to help them. This one over here that is not shaded is doing a lot more poorly. Last year they also dropped all their leaves when they bloomed, and I thought that was normal, but apparently not. So that probably indicated that they were unhealthy, and they have a really bad setup for their roots. They're constricted in these containers, although the roots don't go in the ground, so they really need extra nursing along. Hopefully we'll get fruit set this year. It's our last snap of cabbage. This we've been really enjoying. Liz has been really enjoying eating that. It's got so much water content so she can taste stuff really well with it. I'm going to come around the other side. Those are tomatoes there. So I have that whole patch of lettuce I showed you earlier, but I also take individual plants and I tuck them around in the shade so they can grow as heads, whereas the other ones we pick as cut and come again. These are some mystery hot peppers that we got from a plant trade that have been growing for a few months. Not sure what they are. This was our pipe vine that we had to move over here when we planted out the Christmas tree. And it is died back right now, but every time it's done this, it's come back with a vengeance. So I have no doubt it will be fine. And eventually it'll provide shade for our black pepper vine here, which we moved. It was on our patio because it can't tolerate cold at all, but it wasn't doing well there, so hopefully it'll do better here. We just have some delphinium and the rocket snapdragons in that pot. This is the papaya. I just took off the suckers. I've cut it back 3 times. Every time it grew 5 inches, cut it 1 inch to force it to dwarf. And I just cut off the suckers and the lower leaves, which is to encourage it to fruit sooner. You can see how thick the trunk has gotten. And this, under the shade here, well, we've got some edible ginger over here, and this is the shampoo ginger, and it is sending up new shoots like crazy just in the past few days, probably because it's been so hot. So we're really excited about the shampoo ginger. Hopefully we'll get cones this summer and then we can squeeze the shampoo out of them. So I just have snapdragons in here, and there is a bell pepper there and another bell pepper here. It was not doing well, but I gave it the guano and the micronutrients and the Epsom salts, and it's coming back more. They seem to really, really like having their roots shaded. This is a whole celery patch. This is kind of, we call it the wet area, where we have to, like the papaya and the celery, everything stays more watered, but that also unfortunately makes the dollar weed take over. Here's the little potting bench slash sink I set up. It's working really well so far, and then I can take this out and mix up fertilizer and stuff. We picked a ton of tomatoes the past couple days, but it seems like there's always a few more. So I'll give you a view from this side. There's 1 plot, 2 plots, 3 plots. Liz has been buried in her book on cuttlefish. This is another thing that normally grows into a giant bush, but we have trained into a tree shape. It's called firebush. It's a native. It's I'm trying to think, it attracts the yellow sulfurs. I can't remember if I don't think it's a host plant. I think only cassias are host plants to them, but it has these tubular flowers. It is also supposed to be a hummingbird attractor. We have lots and lots of hummingbird attractors, and maybe one day we'll finally see one here. There's what it looks like from a distance. So in the summer, I just constantly trim, and then I let the taller branches come out, and then I trim under that level. And I just did that all summer and fall until it got this shape, like an umbrella. And then when it was cold, I got it cut way back to let in as much sun as possible. So now that it's going to start heating up again, I'll let the branches get longer and longer on top to provide more shade. This is, I don't know if you can see any, this is waist high here. That's our first planting of Swiss chard. That's the one we've really been harvesting all the time. All the broccoli plants I cut up and put under here, and then put some hay in there on top to decompose. We do a lot of composting in place. And there's another patch over there. And here's our rhubarb, mostly for fun. It'll only grow as an annual here, but Liz really misses it, and we thought it'd be fun to put a plant, and it was really late. If we could have gotten it earlier in the season and grew it when it was colder, it would have done better. But I often put a screen over it during the day. And we had a few potatoes come up from the compost, this one and this one. So I brought a couple seed potatoes too and stuck those in. again mounded this really high. It's significantly higher than the bed. It seems to work wonders. Here's the view over here. This is the sky vine growing in with the yellow rose. That's pretty. There's verbena over here. What else? Well, we have these. Here's a lot more blossoms on this is the front side of the Mysore raspberry. Trying to kind of train the canes that way under the avocado and away from shading the blueberries. This is another patch of garlic, but it's not doing as well as the other one, probably because this bed was amended right before instead of breaking down. So it wasn't in prime condition, and they get more shade over here. This lady gave us these snap pea seeds, but didn't really have any place to put them. Have them kind of sideways on this short trellis, and they're just producing now, but they're very unhappy with the heat, and it's making the leaves yellow, the raspberry, without the ventilation. So I think we'll pull those up in a couple days. Here's another comfrey plant. A lot of them you can't see because I just cut them all down and put them in the soil recently. But here's another worm bin. This one, as you can see, is in progress. It's not ready to go. And you keep a wet paper bag to keep it moist. I think we're gonna put in 1 or 2 more of them too. They're working really well. And then here's the carrot patch. You can see the carrots down there. We're gonna pull these finally today as well. They've been doing really, really good, and they're completely ready to come out. Oh, here's a big one. Ooh, look at that. There it is compared to my foot. So we're gonna pull those out today. And there's the blueberries again, the lavender patch. I have a few of these flowers, the foxglove and the fuchsia, which we managed to keep alive for a few months on our patio last year. We were going to try to do it again this year because it was nice to sit out there, but we couldn't take them home in the car because Liz's asthma was really bothering her, and we didn't want to put them in the car, so we had them out here the past couple days, and they actually look really, really happy under the mulberries. So maybe we'll leave at least one of the fuchsias out here, maybe attract some hummingbirds. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm whipping the phone around. It is so bright and hot out here, it's really difficult to see. These, this is in Charlie's plot here. This is the one that we're temporarily using, us and Bill. And Bill and I started these tomatoes from cuttings about a month and a half ago. This is that heirloom one that's been so wonderful. And they're growing and producing really well. So I'm trying to, our tomato plants just completely crapped out a few days ago. This one still has some tomatoes going on it. Hopefully it'll, stay a few more days, ripen those more. So I'm trying to do some transplanted of some rooted cuttings. I have in a mound here to see if I can get a couple to grow up before it's too late in the season. It's too late to get young transplants or start them from seed. What is this? Do you want to walk? Oh, here you can see the macadamia better from this angle. It's doing really, really well. Gotta move the scale so she can walk. Here's some more of the orange blossoms. The only thing is they haven't been very fragrant. Sometimes I smell them a little bit at night. But for how many blossoms there are on here and the lime plot, it's a little disappointing because we were hoping to